So now we come to the second messianic miracle. From Isaiah 35, verses 5 and 6, the rabbis taught that when the Messiah comes, he would perform 3 messianic miracles. The first messianic miracle was the healing of a Jewish leper. In Herod's temple, there stood 4 chambers: the chambers of the chamber of the Nazarite, chamber of the oil, the chamber of the lepers, and the chamber of the wood. And that chamber of the lepers stood empty for 15 centuries. I mean, from the time Herod's temple was built, for 15 centuries, there was no one recorded instance of a Jew being healed of leprosy. So the rabbi said that when Messiah comes, he will heal the Jewish lepers. So that was the first messianic miracle. And he sent the leper, and then later on he'll heal 10 more. And he tells them, go to the priest, because that's what it said in Leviticus 13 and 14. And he was trying to authenticate his messiahship he said, okay, if you guys say that, if you, the religious society in the Levitical society, the hierarchy of Judaism said that this is a messianic miracle, okay, here I go, I healed the Jewish leper. The second one is the casting out of a mute demon. Now, the Pharisees could cast out demons, but they had a formula for doing so. They would go up to the person that had a demon that was occupying this person, and they would speak to the demon in the person, and they would say, what is your name? And the demon would answer his name. He might say, I'm Legion. And then the Pharisees would cast the demon out using the name to cast the demon out of the person. So the Pharisees taught that when the Messiah came, he would be able to cast out a mute demon. In other words, the Pharisees would ask, what is your name? But the demon could not answer. So the Pharisees could not cast that kind of a demon out of a person, because that demon was mute, could not talk. So they said that when the Messiah came, he would be able to cast out even a mute demon. Now, when there's something that's really, really, really important, all 4 of the gospel writers record it. And this is recorded by all 4, like the feeding of the 5,000, the resurrection, the crucifixion, all those things, all those really important things are recorded by all 4, and this is also. Let's look at Mark first. Mark 3, verses 20 and 22. So this takes place in Capernaum, way up here north of the Sea of Galilee, and Jerusalem is way down here. So members of the Sanhedrin have traveled for days to get up here. And Mark tells us, so there's a big gathering. When he comes into a house, again the crowd gathers so they couldn't even eat. So Jesus and his disciples are in this house, and there's so many people they can't even eat. And his family, Mark tells us, heard about this, and they went out to take hold of him, for they were saying he's out of his mind. To take charge of him, to take hold of him, is the Greek word krateo, which actually means you're arresting somebody, to take hold of them, to arrest them. So to put your hands on them. So they thought he needed to be protected from himself. They thought he was out of his mind. Jesus' family thought he was out of his mind. and look at Matthew now. Turn to Matthew 12. (12:22). That's why in my commentary on the life of Christ, it's a harmony, and I harmonize all these four in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I harmonize those into one document. So in verse 22, then a demon-plagued man who was blind and mute was brought to Yeshua. Now, this was a setup. This was a setup. You know, so you have all these members of the Great Sanhedrin. They're in the stage of observation, and they travel. You know, they can't go through Samaria. They have to come over here, go up on this side of the Jordan, come up here, and it's several days. And you know, I don't know what they were traveling on, but they went a great distance, and lo and behold, a deaf mute shows up. A demon-possessed man that has a demon that's mute. It was a setup. And I'll show you why it was a setup in a second. He was brought to Yeshua, and Yeshua healed him, so he spoke and saw. The crowds were astonished, saying, "This can't be the son of David, can it?" Now the Jews have a leadership problem, complex. They won't hiccup, but they check with their rabbi. You know, at this time, the culture, these people didn't have Bibles. I mean, they might have had some scrolls in their synagogue and heard some readings on the Sabbath day, but they didn't have Bibles. They didn't have Bible studies. The experts were the Sanhedrin. They were the experts. And so they asked themselves, "This can't be the son of David, can it?" But hearing this, the Pharisees said, "This fellow drives out demons only by Beelzebub, the ruler of demons." Bam! They have made their decision. Now, what was supposed to happen with the stage of observation? We talked about the stage of observation and then the stage of interrogation. What was supposed to happen in the stage of interrogation was, if a movement was supposed to be significant, they were supposed to meet and vote. Actually, they would actually vote. Is this person the Messiah? So after the first messianic miracle, which was the healing of a Jewish leper, they went back to Jerusalem. They went back to the meeting place in the royal stoa, and they voted. They didn't even wait for another messianic miracle. They had seen enough. Even though that Jesus had healed a Jewish leper, which was one of their messianic miracles that they were telling everybody would point to the Messiah when he came, they had taken a vote, and they had voted that he was not the Messiah. On the one hand, they were on the horns of a dilemma. On the one hand, he had performed a messianic miracle, but on the other hand, what was the problem? Why didn't they embrace him as the Messiah? If he had performed a messianic miracle, why didn't they just, with open arms? He did not believe in the oral law. He did not believe in the oral law. And the Jews believed that when the Messiah come, he would not only believe in the oral law, he would participate in the making of more oral laws. So they had to make a decision. And if you remember, the rabbis taught that he who teaches the Torah or believes in the Torah does a good thing. He who believes in the oral law does an even better thing. So they had elevated the oral law a little bit higher than even Torah. even Scripture. So when they had to make a decision, yes, Jesus healed a Jewish leper, but he did not believe in the oral law. They fell on the side of the oral law. So they made their decision right here. This is their verdict. In verse 24, Matthew 12:24, the whole culture looked upon the Sanhedrin, the Jewish Supreme Court, as the decision maker. Was this guy the Messiah or not? And they said he was demon possessed. This is what they said. He was able to do these miracles because he was demon possessed. He obviously had power. They weren't denying that he didn't have power. But he said his power comes from Satan. They said that when Jesus had gone to Egypt, when Joseph had taken him and married to Egypt as a child, that he had cut it. This is what the Jews teach today. That he had cut his arm and taken the 4-letter name of God, YHVH, and inserted it into his arm. And that is why he was able to do these magical, these miracles. And Jews today, many people say, well, Judaism is really, really close to Christianity. In a lot of ways it is. But in some things it is as far as the East is from the West. So, and this is one of those times. But hearing this, the Pharisees said, this fellow drives out demons by Beelzebul. Now, Beelzebul, my Bible here says Beelzebul. Some say Beelzebub. Beelzebul, when they were in the captivity in Babylon, was a god of Baal Zebul, meaning Lord of the Palace, and Beelzebub means Lord of the Dung. So they were making fun of Satan, the adversary. This fellow drives out demons only by Beelzebub, the ruler of demons. This will also be in a handout. You got this in a handout. Give this to you in a handout. So, this was a turning point, a point of no return. There's a handout that I have, I'm going to send you in the email, called The Point of No Return. And there were two other times, that the nation of Israel had reached this point of no return. The first time was at Kadesh Barnea after they had left Egypt and Mount Sinai. And they came to Kadesh Barnea, and God said, go into the promised land. I'm giving it to you. Take it. And Moses sent in 12 spies, and only Joshua and Caleb came back with a positive report. The others said, there's giants in the land. There's no way we can go in there and defeat them. That was a point of no return for that generation. So for the next 40 years, all those that were 20 years old and older would die off in the desert. That whole generation of faithlessness had to die in the desert. And then after 40 years, God brought the nation of Israel back to that same place, now with Joshua in command, and he said, now, are you ready to go in and take it? But by not going in the first time, it was a point of no return for the nation of Israel. The second point of no return was Solomon's temple in Ezekiel. Let's look at Ezekiel 8. Verse 1. Ezekiel 8. In the 6th year, on the 5th day of the 6th month, I was sitting in my house. The elders of Judah were sitting before me. Now, many people believe that this is the start of the synagogue. There were 4 deportations from Israel. Daniel was taken early. Ezekiel was taken in the 2nd deportation. So here these Jews were, they're sitting in Babylon. Everything their whole existence had changed. No temple. You look at all the feasts. You look at all the sacrifices. And they were all based on having a temple, having a bronze altar, having a holy place, a most holy place, a priesthood. And they had nothing. So many people believe that this points to the start of the synagogue. Now, when they came back in the land, they had both, and Herod's temple was built, they had both the temple and they continued with the synagogues. And the Spirit picks up Ezekiel. Now, Ezekiel and Jeremiah were contemporaries. Jeremiah's in Jerusalem, Ezekiel's in Babylon. The Spirit picks up Ezekiel, carries him in the Spirit to Jerusalem, and wants to show him a few things.